So I like to do something with the people that I bring on. I like to have my smartest friends on, to kind of like just see what kind of conversation we can have about topics I think are important, things that I think that are missed in the day-to-day, like algorithmic processed BS that we're all experiencing. Like we're all having the same arguments. Like right now, I think we're talking about Iceman and whatever
Drake
Trump.
And Trump somehow.
Yeah, Drake and Trump. UFC at the White House.
Matters.
That's what's happening right now. That's what everybody's talking about. And as a Drake fan, I can admit that's kind of crazy.
That's stupid.
So I have a question for you. It's a question possibly transitions to like a little story time here. But
right.
Do you know why we have political parties in this country?
Why we have political parties in this country?
Yeah.
Specifically parties in general, or the parties that we have?
That's a good this is why I have you here. I think both. I think they're in those both. Two of those questions are intrinsic to each other. A lot of people
simply, you got to figure it's the English. We can blame the English because, for all intents and purposes, even before the U.S. was the U.S., there were Tories and Whigs.
Yes,
and Tories and Whigs became Democratic Republicans and Tories, and then Democrats and Republicans, and then there were various intertwining third, fourth, fifth parties that got brought into the fold, kicked out of the fold as it came to be. But realistically, there was, always something of a left and a right, though the relativism of left and right has changed over time. So there's conservatism and there's progressivism and there's centrism. And even that spectrum has shifted left, right, up and down a little bit over 250 years. But generally, parties were a mechanism to consolidate power with alignment, theoretically, to a set of values that was agreed upon by those in power or who had power.
So
what had money.
So what you just said is entirely correct, right? And it kind of it puts light on why this question is complicated and why I think a lot of people get confused, because there's a lot. When you ask somebody like, what is a political party? Why we have political parties? There's so much to unpack there, right? There's it's
not a simple question.
It's not. However, this is what I like to do. I like to take these very complex questions and kind of look at the narrative story behind it, because things happened, events happened that caused the situations that we're in right now, that created the systems we are in right now. So if somebody asks me that question, particularly about why America has political parties, I would say the reason why we have it is because Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson had beef. They were the original Kendrick, Lamar, and Drake, Tupac and Biggie. And essentially, they had two competing philosophies that emerged into two distinct political parties. So the history that you mentioned is definitely correct. It does, from the Magna Carta on, English philosophy and state building, Thomas Locke and all these philosophers, like they had a real strong, significant impact on how America was formed. But not just them, also the French had a big impact on how we were formed, especially our philosophy behind, the just creating a country outside of, the monarchy, right? But essentially, and this goes, and I want to say this before we even go into this, like George Washington in particular, right? Somebody who was very important to the founding of America, hated the idea of political parties. But almost as soon as he was out of office, two political parties were formed. And those
were already formed though. So I think the misnomer there is the parties already existed.
Yeah.
What the parties reframed into happened over the course of Washington's tenure. So you have to figure that, like, because Adams was the face of what became the party of Washington to a degree, but there was already, again, the Tories and the Whigs from a political philosophy perspective. There were still remnants, monarchical remnants who believed that, like, maybe this wasn't the best idea, but if this is what we're doing, let's see if we can do executive power as a singular executive. Let's not necessarily share that power as much. They lost the argument during the Articles of Confederation through all the way to the Declaration of Independence, all the way through to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. All of that fell off because more people were interested in whether it was the federal system or something akin to it.
Yep. And again,
that was the key.
Yeah.
But again, that, to your point though, I think the Hamilton and Jefferson piece definitely created more lines of delineation. But the lines of delineation, what was interesting about it wasn't just philosophical. It was in large part geographical.
Bingo.
And economic.
Yep.
Because there was a function of economic power and a function of geographic relevance there was a Venn diagram. There was overlap. I mean, Virginia, which again is why people like Washington probably were stuck in the middle, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
And that ended up being how it all came to pass. And then things got more complicated. We got bigger, and the North-South.
Don't go too far. Don't wait. Hold up.
Right.
Don't go too far. You're spoiling the story, right? And this is why I love you, bro.
Oh, so we're gonna get how Drake got to the Bay? Is that the?
Yeah. We gotta get to the Iceman era. We gotta go from GNX to Iceman. You're skipping. You're skipping. All right. So again, correct. And let me explain something. My brother Kevin, just we're political nerds. This guy has family that came on here from the Mayflowers, so he probably has some books. Almost.
A few years later, but yeah.
Yeah, whatever, bro. You was here.
1639.
You were here.
Governor of Connecticut.
Like, if anybody's looking for reparations, I'm gonna send you Kevin's number.
Connecticut. No, we were Connecticut. I was north.
Okay, word. All right. So yes. So and I say proto political parties in context to like distinctly American.
The Tories and the Whigs.
Distinctly American political parties. So after the Constitution, after George Washington, because there wasn't really a lot of pushback when it came to George Washington taking power, right? Like they were delineations, they were differences, but
he was the only one who made sense.
Yeah, exactly.
In that moment,
and I think that's very important. I think that was the first and last time that was ever the case, right?
I would argue, yeah, maybe. I mean, I would argue
there was a popular 42. FDR was pretty,
fourth term FDR, third and fourth term FDR were party to the fact of World War II.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't make sense to change leadership in that moment.
And I think there's that's true. And we'll get into this. Actually, I did an episode. And bro, see, this is why I'm glad you're on here, because I'm thinking through all this stuff, and it's so interesting because, as you see, Kevin is a white man. I'm a black guy, right? And I think that it's you're gonna see why sometimes these stories are told differently based on how you grew up, and unfortunately in this country, even your race, even, someone who's not racist, my boy, whatever. I'm not making it up, but no, yeah, like, damn, that's crazy. But it's going to make sense as I go further. It's going to make sense. And I think you're going to agree with me.
Obviously.
So after George Washington, and during George Washington's reign, right? Like there was distinct regions in America. You had the South and you had the North, who had they had distinct economies. But even during the founding, there was a question about what freedom meant, what liberty was very important. And there was always a discussion on what slavery meant in that context, right? So we can talk about like the economic priorities or the geographical differences, but it's very hard to not point to how important slavery was as a central question for much of the 17th, 18th, 19th century. So the two political parties that formed, you had two distinct philosophies. You had Hamilton, who wanted a strong federal government, central bank. He was an institutionalist, someone close to my heart, probably my favorite founding father because of that. But not only that, he actually, people don't know this, but he grew up in the Caribbean.
Literally everyone knows this if you've seen Hamilton. It's the entire first song.
I'm black, so
So is everyone in Hamilton.
Yeah, but we can't afford those tickets.
No, it's dope. As a storytelling mechanism,
yeah.
There's a whole. So I'll not to disrupt you here, but the first song is about where he came from.
Yeah,
it's called Alexander Hamilton. It's how he came up, how his father died, his mother went away. When he started as a sailing to the charters, selling all of the rum, the sugar, and all the things he can't afford, all of that. How he got basically like given a bunch of money by all the people on the island to go to America and sailing into New York Harbor for the first time and what that led to. And then later during the war, there's talk about him and John Lawrence writing all of the treatises against slavery. Yeah.
And
so that's sort of it talked like that. You should actually see the show or at least like listen to the entire.
I watched it on Disney Plus. It was cute.
It's dope. It's dope. But like, if you listen to the soundtrack without having to see the visuals, like the actual history is very much more than just your classic textbook actual history. It gives you the full context, which is nice.
No, it was good. I think it does reflect how different he was.
100%.
But also if you look into like the literature, his writings, I mean, he wrote a good portion of the Federalist Papers. And I think one thing that, the story in the musical kind of glossed over because of time, whatever, right, is growing up, I think it was St. Thomas. He grew up, that's the island. And that was actually a stop for the slave trade. So even at a young age, he wrote about seeing, how slaves were treated as they were being shipped off to their final destinations. And I think that's something that, he didn't grow up rich. He didn't come from a rich slave holding family. So, I think out of most of the founders, he probably was the most sympathetic. And again, this isn't just me saying this is in his writing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so he didn't really care for keeping slavery as an institution. But then you have Thomas Jefferson, who, as we all know, was the OG slave master, right? He spoke a big game. I think that he spoke to freedom and liberty. I think he even talked about eventually ending that institution, but his whole life depended on slave labor.
Well, he and all of his fellow slave owners, he would be like, you look at all of the people he was aligned with politically who had power, all of them were significant slave owners. Yeah. Like some of the largest plantations and largest volumes of slaves at the time were held by Jefferson's allies. And I think for as much as he wanted to claim one side, he knew that it was realistically and politically untenable for him.
And I think that the kind of the grossest thing about that to me is and you framed it, I think you framed it in the most common, intellectually honest way, that, you know, you talked about the economic incentives and just the way, you know, again, how their economy was set up, like it depended on slavery. And there was truth to that. But Thomas Jefferson was a lazy rich boy. It wasn't like
100%.
He could have worked. He didn't. This guy, he never worked the farm. I think his slaves made nails or something. Like it wasn't even. And a lot of he would spend most of his time in France. We all know his you know, his proclivities with the slave women around him.
We know that he's got a whole 14 families.
Yeah. So it was more than just economic need. These people had like a perverse addiction to the life that slavery provided to them. But that's besides the point. We're talking about political parties, but that's an important aspect that shows you how.
I mean, Thomas Jefferson was Elon Musk of his time.
Yeah.
Like, you know, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. People like his house was like futuristic. Like he would press a button and like a food tray would like appear inside of a wall somewhere. And
he had engineers on staff.
Yeah. And that was literally, it wasn't like a robot. It was a slave boy, you know, hearing a bell and having a rope, send the food up, right? Like it was madness, bro, like madness. And so during that conversation where they were slavery, and there's another thing I want people to understand, like we like to say, well, you have to understand people of their time, slavery was looked at differently. And in a way it was, but slavery was always kind of a thing that people knew. People knew it was like, yeah, this is kind of messed up. Especially during that kind of, you know, Enlightenment period where there was a bunch of revolutions. Sure. And so they feared that someone like Hamilton would get too much influence. And they knew that the institution of slavery, you know, the life that they've lived, their fathers, their grandfathers, their great grandfathers lived, would be at risk. And so you see the development, or like you see the coalescing of these two political parties. You had the Federalists under Hamilton who, you know, pro big government. They wanted the federal government to have a bigger say. They wanted a central bank. They didn't say this out loud, but, you know, if you read between the lines in the subtext, you know, slavery was something that they, you know, pay these people. And then you had the Democratic Republicans who were agrarian, pro-slavery, Southern. And those were the two political parties that formed because of that division. I think it's important to go ahead.
But I will say, add to that, though, Jefferson's got a bit of an irony, because for as much as he was like, he's the guy who wrote his own Bible, right? He basically pulled out all references to a deity and kept the rest. Yeah. But all of his people were hardcore Christians. Yeah. Part of their rationale for slavery was based in that Christianity. Yeah. And so there was a religious aspect to their belief that they had the right to act in that way and own in that way and live in that way.
And I want people to pay attention to what Kevin just said there, right? Like, and again, I hope through all this talk that we're having, you kind of see the bones of our modern day political parties today, right? Like, he's correct. Thomas Jefferson created his own Bible. Sounds familiar. But he also played on and took advantage of existing resentments, existing religious beliefs. He did everything he could to mobilize a base to keep him in power by taking advantage of anything he could. And then you can see people justifying their political ideologies in any way they could, especially through religious belief. I think it's also interesting that the name of the party is the Democratic Republicans, the first truly pro-slavery party in America. And I know many of you who are online who have like MAGA friends would constantly tell you, well, the Democrats were the ones to support the slavery. Well,
Don't give me.
It was a Democratic Republican, so they both.
People that have disavowed the existence of Strom Thurmond.
Yeah, that's so crazy. That's so crazy. So that's the beginning of the first two political parties. Again, political parties weren't something in the Constitution. It was something that the founders, in their writings, tended to go against. They were afraid of the tyranny of factions. But as you can see, due to a number of reasons, these political parties formed anyways, and people coalesced behind them. And that was kind of the case for a while until the War of 1812. Did I say that right? And at the time, the British, they still had their imperial power somewhat, and they flexed their muscles. They were, I don't know how much is this.
Down the White House.
They burnt down the White House. And so the Democratic Republicans were like, Southern boys. They wanted to fight. They wanted, they didn't like that too much. And then the Federalists, on the other hand, they were a little bit more pragmatic. They didn't want to go to war. We're still paying for the revolution. They didn't think, and we were getting our asses kicked for the most part. We eventually won in a truce, and that happening, the Federalists were seen as traitors, and they dissolved. But again, we still have slavery. And this is why I want to make sure people understand, race issues that we have in this country. A lot of the issues and divides that we have in this country. And, I don't want to sound like I'm just harping on this for no reason. It was central to almost our entire identity as a country. Right.
In the war after the War of 1812, it was still another 52 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. 50 years.
Yeah.
50 plus years. That's a crazy number.
And what people don't realize is that for a lot of those 50 years, as we started, especially as we expanded
westward expansion,
that slavery question became more and more prevalent. There's a reason why we went to war.
It got expanded.
Yeah.
I mean, there was new states were slave states or not, and they had to keep them. Yeah. The whole thing was, as states were incorporated, they were incorporated as slave states or free states.
Yeah.
As they went west. And so Missouri was a slave state, and Iowa and Ohio were free states, and, on out all the way west until, we didn't quite get there in real terms from a state perspective. But what was Texas going to end up being? That was a big question. I mean, the whole point of, we could talk about that. Texas was literally taken from Mexico to expand slavery. That was to be the next. That was, state. And it's going to be so large that it was going to carry more power. Yep. So before we even get to that, right? So I don't know if you guys are following. But by the way, we have 12 minutes. We are never getting to Iceman if you keep doing this. Well, I'm going to stop. I'm gonna stop soon. We're gonna skip some time, right? We're gonna skip something. So because I have other videos. If you watch that, kind of explain some of the stuff in between. Yeah. But this is literally, I'm just trying to show exactly how these political parties formed. A little more concise than we did, but we're nerds, so we're gonna keep getting a sidetrack. Keep talking. Yeah. It is what it is, right? So the Federalist Party was seen as traitors because they didn't support. They were seen as too pro-monarchist during the War of 1812, even though that was just propaganda. And so for a very brief time, it was just Democratic Republicans. And of course, they split into the Democrats and the Whigs. So that Whig Party, as the name came back, it wasn't said explicitly, but it was still the same, federalist, agrarian state rights. Federalist, not monarchical. Exactly. And they kind of avoided the slave question for the most part, but it was there until it got, until the slave question became too big to ignore. And then the Whig Party itself split and formed the Republican Party,
which was explicitly a pro-abolition party as it was formed. Again, those things changed. So that's where we get that Republican-Democrat divide that we're dealing with to this day. What do you think so far, Big Kev? How am I doing?
I think we're pretty well aligned. I think that's where it flip-flopped. Well, like, I'm sure you've already done a video on the flip-flop, but I think you actually have. There's one of those videos on TikTok in particular that drives me nuts. It's the guy and the girl in the drop top driving around talking about it.
Oh yeah, that was bro.
Oh
yeah. So as you see, like we've always had, from almost the beginning, we've had two parties that, you know, our political divides coalesce into, and for the most part, one of the central divides. You don't have to say race, but it did involve questions of identity, who belongs, and over time.
And I think you have to put in there economic theory in a certain sense.
I think that's true, but this is where you're not wrong that
the race division, inclusiveness, all of the slavery, but slavery as a concept is those things, and it's an economic tool.
Two things can be true.
Purest form, right?
Yeah. But I think that, for me, I think that those issues are generally window dressing to more. We talk about vibes a lot now, right? We talk about vibe elections. I think every election was a vibe election. People choose who they relate to. People choose a person they think is going to take care of them. And I think forever in this country, and because of that peculiar institution, we've kind of poisoned ourselves to think that the color of our skin or the lineage of our ancestry is the most important thing to think about when we look at who will care for our interests the most. As a whole, not everybody took political science at a Northeast elite school, buddy.
I don't disagree. I think, yes, to a degree. I think there is to your point, from a vibes perspective, from a feels perspective, that is absolutely true. But there's also, as uneducated or, whatever the situation might be, as people may be who make certain decisions based on said vibes, there is a lived experience that is economic in a lot of ways. And I think economy gets thought of as, the stock market's at 50,000. Like, that is not the economy for the vast majority of people. The vast majority, like right now, what we're experiencing is the economy for the vast majority of people. High prices, inflation, uncertainty. Where does my next meal come from? How am I going to get to work? How am I going to get my car on the road? How am I going to feed my children? How am I going to support my children at all, support my family at all? All of those things, I think, are intrinsic to some of the sort of it's why populism became as prevalent as it has been on both sides of the aisle. Whether it's the Trump side or the Bernie side, that's the reality of it. And I think, for as much as the go with your people vibe is a part of it, what your people are experiencing is the economics of things. Right? I think that's where we land a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like 2008, things were so bad for so many people that Obama was a viable option even for white people.
So, and that goes to, I guess, my final we got a final point on this, right? We'll see how final this will be.
Well, 11:30 just got canceled, so we can go a few extra minutes.
All right, word. All right. So I think over time,
talk about it. I spent like 5 minutes.
So yeah, we went through kind of the history of these political parties, and something big happened. The Civil War happened. We don't have to get into that. There's a video on that. I might do more on that. Whatever. But
there's a whole 27-hour Ken Burns thing. Go watch that.
Yeah, go watch that. But political parties became more institutionalized, and they became, the de facto filtering mechanism for people that we elect, especially for the highest office. And so you're right. It is the economy, stupid, right? George Carvel say that, and I think that's probably the most intelligent thing anybody ever said.
He's ever said.
Yeah, yeah. He's lived off of that. It's crazy.
Especially with that accent, Jesus.
But I think we miss an important thing. Like people don't know. People know what they want, and this sounds crazy. I know this is going to sound so crazy. People know what they want. People don't know how to get it. A country. I
think there's another way to look at that. It's people don't know how anything works.
Yes. And it's not to say people. And this is not people are ants, right? I'm not. This isn't my villain.
It's not people are stupid. It's that our education system sucks.
Yeah,
and we focus on a lot of the wrong things.
That plus you can only focus on a few things. There's a reason why we divide priorities. This is the reason why we delegate things. This is the reason why I think a representative government is a very smart idea, right? It's hard enough to run a corner store, right? Like it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of hard work to run a restaurant. What do you think it takes to run $1 trillion+ economy, right? 300 million people plus at this point. Largest military ever in history, right? As many political opinions as there are people, right? Like it's a very complex thing. And I know we've been, for the most part, trained to think that politicians are these dumb, stupid people, which some of them are. And the bureaucracy is nothing more than an evil deep state that wants to, I don't know, trans kids or whatever the hell people are talking about right now. But all of these systems are vital. All of these systems have done as much bad as we've had in our history. Obama said, what did he say? The arc of history is long. Like, and it has moved positively, like from workers' rights to civil rights, to the middle class growing. And a lot of these things didn't happen evenly, or they could have been better, but it takes a lot to get these things done. And we need a way, sorry to say, to filter out idiots like Donald Trump from getting into power, right? We need a way to prevent people from having no choice but to make a bad choice. And I think political parties, at least they used to do a much better job at that.
So, yes. However, I think one thing you have to remember about Trump is that, not to give the man any credit because he deserves none, but he is unique.
Yeah.
He is not, we have not seen Trump before.
Yeah.
We didn't see, even Bloomberg, or before that, like Michael Forbes, or is Michael Forbes? Whatever Forbes, Bill Forbes, whatever Forbes' first name is.
Billionaire Forbes.
These guys have tried to run for office before, and they were rich and they had influence, but they didn't have charisma. And then you had
Ross Perot.
Charismatic people who did, but then you had super charismatic people who didn't have any money, and so they had a hard time. getting into power, getting to a certain level of power. This is a man who was built his entire persona off of charismatic con manism, like, while also having been mildly to extremely successful, just like his dad, in a core requirement of life, which is housing.
Yeah.
You know, he's a slumlord. His dad was a slumlord, but a slumlord at the China buying all of our apartment buildings level. Like, that was the reality of how that money came to be, and how Trump was started with a silver spoon in his mouth, even though they always love to deny that. A small $200 million loan. Okay. But that's the reality of it. And I think we won't have, and he's also got weird predilections towards things like vindictiveness.
Yeah.
That is appealing to a certain element.
Yeah.
Particularly within the right.
So every way you described him, every way you described Trump is correct.
Should be a negative in a lot of ways.
And I don't think people remember, like, the GOP did not want Trump anywhere near the nomination.
JD Vance thought he was a Nazi.
Yeah, but they couldn't stop it. And I think, and this goes to what I feel is how political parties have evolved, especially the GOP in particular. I have no love for the GOP. I have no love for American conservatism. People could say it's all about the economy with these guys, but for me, they've been the party of slavery, Jim Crow.
Look at the Supreme Court. It's absolutely, it's obviously not just about economics.
Yeah.
It never has.
It never has. However, right, you at least got that. The person that won, George W. Bush, horrible. But he at least knew enough.
Now in comparison, was he?
yeah. I mean, he got. He
wasn't a horrible human being.
Yeah.
In the purest sense, he probably was a bad person from a decision-making perspective, and he's not that bright.
Yeah.
But like, he wasn't a legitimately bad person.
Yeah. I
think Trump is a legitimately bad person.
There's a reason why they weren't no kings protests during George W. Bush, even though arguably he harmed this country in bad ways. But it's not even being president isn't just about the policies that you implement, right? It's how you talk to Americans. Mm-hmm. It's how you are the consoler in chief, right? Like when there was tremendous anti-Muslim. I mean, you didn't even have to be Muslim at the time. I mean, sheiks. I know we're old enough to remember, anybody that looked kind of Middle Eastern getting attacked. George W. Bush went out his way to like tell people like, no, that's not what you do. Who's John McCain, right? John McCain
did the same thing. Literally at one of his rallies.
Yeah,
shot that woman down.
Yeah, and that's what and you refer to those people as statesmen, right? Like, right. You needed someone like that in the highest office, even if you disagree with them politically. You needed someone who, at the very least, calmed the worst impulses of Americans here at home. And someone like Trump doesn't do that. And the reason why I think somebody like Trump was able to gain so much power, at least in the GOP, I think the Democratic Party is kind of going in this direction, is that they kind of dismantled the institutional guardrails within their own party, right? Like, it became more and more democratic. It became more and more influenced by the whims of the majority of primary voters. And again, like I say, people aren't stupid. I think most people are smart. It's just that most people don't spend time thinking about the Constitution. Most people don't think about the norms and traditions that this country is based on. They don't think about
long-term consequences.
They don't think about long-term consequences.
All of that's important. People aren't educated necessarily on the Constitution. People aren't educated necessarily on government as it functions today. Yeah. But conceptually, they also don't think in 20, 30, 40 years. Mm-hmm. When you think about what is this going to mean for the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
This is a lifetime appointment, and you're putting 40-something-year-olds in there.
Yeah.
These people never fucking die.
Yeah.
You can believe. Yeah, bomb if you want.
I don't believe nothing.
But then, fucking right. So, but there's a lot. But the ones who do think about that are the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
And organizations like that, and Project 2025.
Yeah.
And organizations like that, and all of the people, the Stephen Millers of the world,
yeah,
who are around Trump, who are looking at the long term to fit their best interests.
Yeah.
That is where the best, like where we talk about like people vote against their interests. Like this isn't just like the male black vote has shifted 10% towards Trump in the last 9 years or 10 years, whatever it is. It's, and then we say, oh, they're voting against their whatever. Some of them are, some of them aren't.
Yeah.
So this is going to be good for some of them. Like this is going to be good for a lot of people who have money already.
Yeah. But there's a reason.
It's a haves and have not situation. It always has been. And this is just pushing that narrative that much further. And I think what nobody recognizes, and this is fully off topic in a 7 other podcasts that can happen, we're entering a period of different uncertainty than we have ever seen before.
Yeah.
AI is going to change the face of work. It is going to change the face of productivity, not in the way that people talk about productivity now, but in the way that people will talk about productivity. It's going to be nuts. And I think a lot of the people that think, oh, we're protected because we have money, are not going to be necessarily the ones that are able to manage that money, because it's going to be a much more individualized economy. And it's already becoming that. I mean, you're a perfect example of it. The gig economy, I hate the concept of hustle culture, but like to a certain degree, those people who go out on their own to do a thing may have a few more protections in their back pocket than people who are like me in a large corporate environment. Mind you, I'm in sales, so I'm also somewhat protected because sales is, at least for the moment, going to be a human function for some time. But
I leverage AI a lot in what I do. So like I to do this. I'm
literally on a panel in 2 weeks talking about AI in human capital. Like,
to be honest with you, I couldn't do what I do now as easily and as cheaply 10 years ago. Like I would probably have to hire. I've been thinking about it. Like I've been talking to some virtual assistants in like the Philippines and stuff like that, and they're pretty cheap. But I could pay $20 a month.
We have an entire Manila operation.
Yeah, and but I don't right now. I don't need them. Because of AI.
But you might at some point.
At some point, yeah.
I just literally, so behind the curtain here, I have to fill out a rate card for a set of hospital systems. The rate card is 16,000 lines long.
Jeez.
Because it's 166 job titles across 37 states, and rates vary by state because of burdens and everything else.
Yeah.
I outsourced it to my team in Manila because we had a bunch of data from a bunch of sources, and I was like, here's all of that.
Yeah. They
threw some automation against it. It pulled in some stuff, and then they basically went through people-wise and went through the rest of it, where the automation wasn't able to compare notes.
Okay, all right. Let's go. That we're gonna talk about this in another time, but all
right. Let's fast forward, because we're at the point where I think you're going to want to clip this back. Last 10 minutes is probably going to get clipped out for a different conversation. Yeah. But I think for the purposes of where you wanted to go in terms of like the history of the parties now, understanding that there was a party flip in between the 50s and 60s due to the Dixiecrats becoming Republicans and the West.
Well, I'd say the 30s, early 30s, late 20s to early 70s.
The Dixiecrats were the hard turn.
Yeah.
So the Republicans freed the slaves are now all Democrats.
Yeah, essentially.
And the slave owners who were Democrats are now all Republicans.
Yeah. And so
for the most part.
You say something important too. You talked about the Heritage Foundation. You talked about Stephen Miller. All of that I think is important to this. Like them and people like them are very important to this conversation. Because this is why this is my fear about the future of the Democratic Party. So Trump, and we talked about the various reasons why he was able to take over the Republican Party. This was all intentional for the most part, right? The Republicans took in Dixiecrats. They took in, the descendants of the Democratic Republicans, the old pre-war Democrats, the Dixiecrats, the children of robber barons who were much, much worse. And those people, I think, are hostile to everything that we hold dear as a liberal democracy. I think that I'm not a big oligarch class person, but it would be disingenuous for me to say that there aren't a group of, they haven't been always a group of wealthy, powerful individuals who wanted to do everything they can to get the cheapest labor possible, to make the most amount of money possible. And the easiest, most effective way to accomplish that in a democracy like ours is to break the filtering system, to get, people in power who are sympathetic to what they want and not what the people want. And that's what Donald Trump represents, right? People talk about, I don't trust populists. The reason why I don't trust populists is because I believe for the most part, populists are inherently anti-institutional. I think institutions are important, and I think institutions are important in this country because institutions were the things that eventually protected people like me, protected women, helped institute civil rights, right?
I would argue.
I know you would.
I think it depends on your definition of populist, because by all accounts, Bernie was a populist.
I don't like Bernie.
Right. That's fine.
Yeah.
But you can't say Bernie is not an institutionalist. Bernie wanted to make the institution much bigger.
Yeah.
He wants to do Medicare for all. He wants to do, free healthcare, free education, build those pieces of the institution in a European, Scandinavian model. Right?
All right, let me do something that people that run podcasts never do. Let me change my opinion based on what you just said, right? You're correct. Let me. It's not that I don't like Bernie. I think he's a bit overrated, but you're right. I wouldn't.
He was the wrong messenger. But
yeah, when I say populist, I don't think I'm talking about someone like Bernie. I'm talking about, a Donald Trump, possibly a Graham Plantner.
But Donald Trump is a fake populist. So
they're all fake.
But listen, by definition, purely by definition, because populism is a political approach that pits the pure, ordinary people against a corrupt, self-serving elite. Donald Trump is a corrupt, self-serving elite who said, I can fix all your problems. His message was populist. His actions have not been. So
give me one populist.
He just talked a bunch of bullshit.
Give me one
Bernie is a pure populist who couldn't get anything done.
But he works within institutions.
Right. In this situation, so does Trump.
But I think populists, and again, I'm not using the dictionary definition of it, but as I see it, populists tend to, instead of populists going after or taking or using any type of intellectual rigor to figure out who the real enemies are, they just group all people with power as the enemy, as those rich oligarchs that need to be toppled.
But there's also the drain the swamp concept, right? Where politicians, even ones who were not true oligarchs, who were just career politicians, were part of the elite swamp.
But that word career politician,
they replaced them with actual fucking oligarchs.
Yes. That's it became this
what's fucking worse? And nobody talked about it because he kept firing said oligarchs every fucking 4 months.
Yeah.
And now this time around, he's had far fewer firings. the oligarchs have stayed in place, even though somehow they're dumber than the first round, which is an insane thing. Like, you have got, like, first round, you had Milley, you had Tillerson, who was like at least a legitimately smart dude who understood what his job was.
Yeah.
Rick Perry, not the greatest guy in the world, but he was from the world of the thing they put him in charge of for energy. Like, it made sense. None of the people he has there now are anything other than just like sycophants who have a shit ton of money. Howard Lutnick is the perfect example. It's crazy. So I think we're in a situation where there are a lot of challenges in terms of regular people who have regular jobs and regular lives are not rich. I think we have to really redefine what rich looks like. By every definition that I have ever been able to find, I'm lower upper class, basically, like upper middle class, whatever you call that. I don't think the middle class really exists anymore.
Everybody's middle class. Apparently,
everybody's middle class or nobody's middle class, right? I think like, because of where I live, I'm practically paycheck to paycheck. If I had the same income and situation and lived in the Carolinas, my house would be paid off, my cars would be paid off. I would not have any debt. I would not be living paycheck to paycheck. The situation would be different. That's the reality. And so there's this thing with populism where the wrong people are in some cases being pointed out as being elites. And there's this thing with populism where the wrong people are being seen as being populist. Yeah. When there is, just because you say a thing, this is the perfect example. Andrew fucking Schultz. Comedian. You know who he is. He's got that podcast. Love guys.
Unfortunately, I know who he is.
Andrew Schultz, probably not the best guy. Seems like he's trying now. Definitely was not trying before, and was entirely hoodwinked, to the point that even he will admit that he was hoodwinked. They all admit this now.
Yeah.
Some of them still follow the leader. Schultz does not. I think Theo Vaughn, or whatever his name is, probably is a little bit less likely to be as easily hoodwinked next time. Although I think he's really introspective, but he's also kind of a moron. So it's hard to tell what's what with him. Rogan,
it's the accent.
It's crazy. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a whole other thing with Theo. Rogan, God knows, like, the man believes flat Earth from one guy and then believes what's facts from another. Like, what is happening? But I think what the reality is, like, even the influential people were hoodwinked by the concept of populism that would have applied to them or people they know. Because comedians know a lot of struggling comedians, and they want the things that Trump said was going to happen for those struggling comedians. And none of that happened. And now their friends are hurting. And that's a problem. So I think the left, not to make this a left-right thing, but I think the left has to redefine or bring back the actual definition of populism as a ideology that is actually built for the people. It needs to be. Can we buy the FUBU moniker?
For us, by us.
Like, I think that's the reality. Is it has to be somewhat self-sustaining. It has to be institutionalized, and it has to be at, for lack of a better term, the expense of the elites. It has to be at the expense of the corporate functions.
Yeah.
Because they aren't playing their part in society at this point. So I think there is a point at which we are now seeing the parties become, and both of them, become so disconnected from the populace while still claiming populism but not doing populism, that the reason the Democrats are still so unpopular, even though Trump's popularity is in the tank, is because they haven't told the story of how even if, and they can't even agree on the story of what.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. I just think it's going to be hard because even from the beginning of the story, it's been entirely too easy to play on the resentments of poor white people and now growing poor Black people, poor Hispanic people. All you really need is someone who is charismatic enough and with the right amount of ethics.
Do you say ethics or ethnics?
Ethics. Well, with the minimum amount of ethics necessary, or lack of ethics, to take advantage of these people. From Thomas Jefferson taking advantage of religious Southerners who thought that slavery was something that they needed for their livelihoods. To
Jefferson was smart Trump.
Yeah. No, but it's not just him.
In a lot of ways.
It's not just him, but it's also to the children of the robber barons who were able to rope in evangelicals and mix, their economic needs with their religious, but it's important with their economic needs, with their religious beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. To
purported religious beliefs, because every time scripture gets brought up, they're like, that's not what that means.
And to Nixon, playing to the fears that white people had of a changing America, right? To Trump talking about immigrants killing people, right? Like, everything you're saying is needed, but I think that we have to first come to terms with our inability as a people to just get over this shit and do the right thing. What you're saying is
it sounds like you need somebody who can appeal to the pan-ethnic base,
mm-hmm.
while also not scaring off the economically disadvantaged whites.
Yeah. And I think Obama was the closest. Clinton was actually one of the closest we had to that. And, he was
our first Black president.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
And look, that was probably one of our biggest moments of economic prosperity in this country. Obama.
We hit surplus for the first time in since.
Obama, but we see how like the conservatives kind of like took a knife to that by playing dirty with the Supreme Court, right? Which pulled us back into economic ruin for a long time. Then we had Obama. He came in, did his thing. He was very charismatic. There's a lot of Trump Obama voters, right? But there was major blowback on that based on his race. And it's not that I think people intentionally hated Obama. I think that conservatives in this country, they know their audience, and they were able to again poke the bear of that racial resentment to get back into power. And now we have Trump, and it's frustrating because as much as we can talk about what we need to do, as much as most of us know what needs to happen, I feel like no matter how far we get, there's always going to be that old demon that pops his head up and pulls us back down. And I hope we survive this time,
What I think is funny is the kind of this end. If the 2028 election ends up being JD Vance versus AOC, which I would not be surprised if that were the case. I think it's too soon for her, but she is the right mix of.
Let me not shake my head. AOC is definitely. I've grown to like her, which is crazy because now leftists hate her.
She's the right mix of all the things we need.
Yeah.
In fairness.
Yeah.
Both personality, genetics, attitude, willingness to start shit. Like, I think that's a real thing.
Yeah.
JD is JD, couch fucker.
You know who I think is going to be we got a couple of dark horses on the GOP side. We have Massey.
GOP side for sure.
We have Massey.
I don't think any of them are going to get the backing.
I don't think they need, I don't know if you need the backing of the GOP party anymore. I think you need a message. You need the base. And I think that there's enough money. There's enough billionaires.
Who are you thinking?
Massey and Tucker.
I think Tucker's a possibility. Massey, no.
You don't think? Well, both of those guys scare me because I think that they've done enough to separate themselves from Trump, yet remain.
Massey.
Yeah.
No way. I wouldn't even mind Massey if we're being honest about it. Like if we had to have another Republican president, at the very least, I understand where he stands and where his at least somewhat where his moral center is that none of these others have. Tucker scares me because nobody knows where his moral center is, and he's still kind of a Nazi.
Yeah.
And while he's built himself his own brand, I think the brand is disingenuous because it's not entirely where it was 4 years ago. It's not entirely where it was 10 years ago. I think the reality, I think they're going to have a weak showing.
Yeah.
I think if there's going to be a random, it's going to be somebody we haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah. I just know that these next two election cycles are, the Democrats they're going to be wild. The Democrats, they're, as unpopular as they are, according to polling, which I'm a little skeptical about. I don't think it really matters much.
I wonder if they're unpopular, but easily voted for.
Clearly. I mean, that's what's happening now,
Yeah.
But
they
it's
keep
just
winning these special elections.
I don't want them to shoot themselves in the foot because there is an avenue for Republicans to take the White House again, I think. And I
100%.
would hate for that to happen, to be honest with you. So
it would not be good. I think we have a bunch of decent options, no great options.
Yeah. I like,
even Gavin's a decent option.
I like Gavin, but I think the Democrat.
I don't like him, but I think he's a decent option. I think Chris, what's his name? Chris Murphy from Connecticut.
Yep.
Would be phenomenal.
Shapiro.
He looks the part.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good options.
Shapiro's not getting in the White House unless he's VP.
Yeah,
in this day and age, let's be honest.
Listen, I read Kamala's book, and I kind of want her to run again. I want to see what she can do with a full runway. I mean, I know it's crazy, but again,
I think we know what she would do with a full runway, and it's why she was ousted from the primary so early in the last cycle. Yeah. I think she's not a good politician, if we're being perfectly honest. She's a wonderful person to have in power.
Yeah.
Is not a good person to run for power.
Well, and I'll be quick. Shoot. You got a little bit more time?
I don't.
Okay.
But we can do it. We can do a Kamala episode.
I'll give you the last word as we end it. Anything you want to?
I don't like Drake, and I don't want to talk about Drake. I'm glad we didn't have to talk about Drake. I kind of wish we had gotten to your point about Drake because I think it's probably going to be very funny to me, and I'm going to disagree with it entirely.
Yeah.
But that said, no, this is fun. We'll do more of these. We'll carve out some time, evenings, weekends, whatever. So
perfect.
This was fun,
right.
And as someone I've known for coming up on 20 years in September.
Crazy.